Hi and good evening. My name is David. I use he, him pronouns, and today I am running a session of Lovecraftesque. Lovecraftesque is a game of sort of mythos investigation and eldritch horror. It's written by Becky Anderson and Josh Fox of Black Armada Games. It is a sort of GMless game again with shared narrative control, where between the players that we have here today, we will be telling the story of an individual investigating, or at least witnessing strange goings on that are linked to a darker secret. We will get into the full description of what this game entails in a moment. But this game is being run as part of the Gauntlet online role-playing community, specifically as part of the Gauntlet Community Open Gaming, which is an initiative we run about every quarter, where we kind of open up our sessions to people to sign up on the day. Well, either to sign up on the day or to sign up a little bit in advance. Outside of our usual process. This is our Gauntlet Con edition. We usually have an annual online con sort of around this time of the year, and so that's sort of what we're doing today. So if you want to find out more about the Gauntlet, what we do, how to play games with us, all that sort of stuff, check out our website at gauntlet-rpg.com. Which I'll put a link to that down below. You can find out more about sort of the gaming calendar we use, as well as we have some podcasts. We have a monthly gaming zine. You can find out about all that sort of stuff on that website. So do feel free to check that out. So yeah, I'm just before we get started, I'm just going to ask my players to introduce themselves, so we won't be doing traditional character creation in this game. So yeah, I'll just go through in order of how we've put ourselves in on the character keeper. So Brandon, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Oh, you're muted, Brandon. You're still muted on Zoom.
Keyboard shortcuts, pa.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Brandon. Him, although I'm not particular, and I've been with the Gauntlet since earlier this year, and have played lots of games, and I'm having a great time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg. I use he, him pronouns as well. I've been on the Gauntlet for, I think this is my third Gauntlet Con now, which almost makes me old hat. I don't know. I'm super excited. I've been having a great weekend so far, and this will be my last game of it. So I'm excited to play Lovecraftesque.
Thank you. And yeah, this is my third Gauntlet Con as well. I started not long before the. I think the first game I played on the Gauntlet was like end of August, 3 years ago. So yeah, similar vintage, I think. But yeah, this is also my final game of the con, so I'm looking forward to this. It's good fun. But yeah, thank you. And last but not least, Mike, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mike. My pronouns are he, him. I live in Ithaca, New York, US. I've been a member of the Gauntlet for about not quite 2 years. I've been playing off and on for about 2 years. Started GMing about on the Gauntlet about 6 months ago. Having an awful lot of fun. This is my fourth game on Gauntlet Con on this Gauntlet Con, and this is the first time I'm a player. So it's nice to take the players. Well, it's not really a player's game, so I knew nothing of Lovecraftesque coming into this, so this should be a lot of fun.
Thank you. No, and that's yeah. As I said, yeah, it is. You'll sadly only get a break from GMing about a quarter of the time, but you know, still, it's something. This as I said, this I have. I'll talk a little bit about how Lovecraftesque, what Lovecraftesque is and how it works now. I'll introduce by the our sort of CATS mechanism. This stands for concept, aim, tone, and subject matter, or safety, as I've heard some people saying recently, which I might switch over to because it's shorter. But the basic idea of this is it just gives us a kind of quick overview on sort of the broad strokes of what the game is about and what it's like, what playing it involves, and all that sort of thing. Do feel free. I said I will be kind of doing a bit of a monologue, but do feel free to jump in if you have any questions, if you want to ask anything, get any clarifications, make any suggestions, anything else on that sort of vein. Do jump in. Like I said, I will kind of rattle through this, but if you want to contribute, that is great. It saves my voice if nothing else. So the concept of this game. So Lovecraftesque is, as you can probably deduce from the name, is a game designed to create, sort of generate stories in the genre of H.P. Lovecraft's of cosmic horror stories, but it's also not just Call of Cthulhu or what have you with the serial numbers filed off. The creators of the game recognize that a lot of, particularly a lot of Lovecraft's writing is sort of anchored in some fairly harmful views on race, mental health, other factors, and some of the games that kind of follow in that tradition sort of bake those in as part of the system in a way that's often if not actively harmful, at least less than ideal. So this sort of was designed to kind of get that idea of that sort of feel of that Lovecraftian horror, that sort of lurking cosmic dread, all that sort of thing, but without actually being reliant on the work of Lovecraft, the mythos, as it's referred to, and all that sort of thing. So by and large, we won't be we will neither be expecting nor aiming to replicate any of the actual elements of the Cthulhu mythos in this game. So we won't necessarily be having like Migo and Shalgoths and whatever else in this. This is kind of our space to create in sort of from the ground up. Like I said, inspired maybe by the tone and by the sort of feeling of the genre, but not like a slavish reproduction of it. Aside from that, as I sort of already alluded to, this game is played with a single protagonist who is referred to as the Witness. And as the name sort of implies, the primary focus of the Witness is just to experience the horror that we are generating. Obviously, as a character, they do have agency, but that agency, when it comes to actually interacting with the horrors that we will be building, is somewhat limited. So what we as players will be doing is portraying that protagonist, and essentially the way this works is that in any one scene, one person will be representing our shared protagonist, and that responsibility will shift around between us as we go through the game. One other player will be taking on the role of the narrator, per scene. This narrator role is kind of a bit like a more traditional sort of GM role. You'll have when you're in the role of the narrator, you will have kind of, you'll describe scenes, you'll say what happens, you'll have kind of the overall control of everything outside of the protagonist. And the final role that will be taken by everyone else who is in that current scene is not either the protagonist or the narrator. They will take on the role of the Watchers. The Watchers, their sort of function is to support the narrator, which might be by playing an NPC when the narrator asks them to. It might be just sort of adding additional detail onto a scene to kind of intensify the atmosphere. We'll have a little discussion about how this will work in a moment, but that's the high concept of the game. We have these sort of roles. After each scene, those roles will turn around. There's some structure to the game that lays out what scenes we'll play, what needs to happen in those scenes, how we move towards the end of the game. In this particular game, we will be using one of the play sets that is provided with the Lovecraftesque book. It is called On Ilkley Moor, Baht'at, which it is set during World War II. It follows our protagonist for this game is a young evacuee who has been evacuated out to rural West Yorkshire. Whilst the bombing of Britain's cities carries on during World War II, and whilst she is in this little village, she will experience strange occurrences, and we will see where things go from that. I will just so that's kind of the high concept of what we'll be playing today. The aim of this game is, as I said, to create a shared mystery between us all. Explore the protagonist and their experiences of the supernatural. The way we do this is there's a again, I'll get into the full discussion in a second, but basically in each scene the narrator has to give one clue to the protagonist. We then go away and we take a few minutes at the end of each scene for us all to sort of like consider the clues that have been like produced up until this point and think about what we as an individual think might be happening with the mystery, and we sort of develop that out, and but we don't discuss that again. I'll sort of say how this works properly in a moment. This game, as I mentioned just now, it follows a set structure, so we kind of have a guide of how we play through this game. We have some choice in it, but broadly speaking, there's a sort of three act structure to the game. Also, the other thing to note is that this game is really focused on just the idea of exploration, or not even exploration, but just experiencing the supernatural. Depending on how you're playing it exactly, you might have a slightly more overtly investigative focus for the game, or not, and either works. But the one of the core things to sort of bear in mind with this is this isn't really a game about like trying to solve the problem of the weird things that are going on. It is just about sort of seeing how they develop and what that implies about the world and that sort of thing. So it's not about sort of hunting down the monster and putting an end to it, really. In fact, explicitly, unless we play with a certain edition, that is not possible. It's just about kind of that experience as we see what's going on. Tone wise, as sort of probably you might be able to guess from what we've been saying, the tone of this game tends to be fairly sort of quiet and melancholy. A lot of the time there's that it has this sort of brooding horror. It's not like high action, it's not it's not, a lot of the time as well, even like the horror elements themselves can be quite understated. So it's got that much more sort of quiet, brooding horror air to it. There are some specific restrictions around what elements we can introduce into the game. So what tends to happen is the further we get into the game, there is both more overtly supernatural and potentially perilous content sort of comes up, but it's very much a building sort of tension rather than sort of a starting off with a big bang. So that's sort of tonally what we can expect. And finally, subject matter for this game. This is a horror game, so we can expect to be playing very much in those sort of horror themes. Particularly sort of stuff we might expect from sort of Lovecraft and related works. So things like personal horror, existential horror, body horror, all of those can potentially be present. This sort of involves some of the sort of, I said, some of those tropes that might manifest themselves in the idea of things like false perceptions, mind control, voluntary and involuntary sort of physical transformations or mental transformations, cult activity, that sort of thing. So those are sort of things we're likely to be dipping into. This doesn't have, again, this isn't sort of like Call of Cthulhu. We aren't having, we don't have, you know, sanity points or any other mechanic that models mental health or anything like that. But obviously it is possible that some of the themes we might touch on might get close to things like depression, suicide, dissociative disorders, that sort of thing. We aren't looking really to like model any sort of idea of mental health effects on the protagonist as such, but some of the themes might touch on those ideas. There's the potential for violence in general, though actually that's relatively minor in this particular place that we're using. Most of the additional elements that are likely to be brought in aren't directly related to physical violence.
Brandon, was like, you have a question?
Oh, sorry, did I miss?
Yeah, I got the notion from that. It's that if violence occurs, it's much more likely to be something that the witness sees.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. Or hears about, reads about it, or is told about, but it's not something directed at the witness.
Yes, that is mostly correct. There's not really it's very unlikely that the witness will be involved in either the like the commission of violence or necessarily be a victim of violence. The only time that's really likely to be a possibility in this game is in sort of the final phase, and we'll have a bit more of a discussion about that in a moment. This also then does bring me on to the point that in this game, our core assumption is that our protagonist is a child. They're a 12-year-old girl. So we sort of have that there will be an element of sort of child endangerment and sort of, you know, potential death or harm to a child. So I just want to call that out straight away. We will in a moment. I'll stop our record and we can have a proper discussion on our sort of lines and veils and stuff like that. But I just want to make that sort of clear up front. Also, by default, part of the establishing line of this backstory for the character is that they've had a recent bereavement. A younger sibling of theirs has recently been killed. Again, if that's something we don't want to deal with, we can veil that, we can line that, whatever, when we get into that discussion. But just to make those things clear up front. The other thing is, obviously, because we are playing with a child protagonist, we won't really have any sexual content in this game. You know, I think the most that we could potentially have is, like, you know, a very you know, hand wavy allusion to, you know, maybe spotting a courting couple out on the moors or something similar, but there'll obviously be no actual sexual content involving our protagonist, and I think just in general probably avoiding like sexual themes as a core focus of the horror is a bad you know way to go as well, probably just all told for this one. So as I said, we will be using some safety tools as well to kind of because we're I mean, for any game, using safety tools is preferable to not, but I think for a game about horror it is absolutely mandatory, without a doubt, because we are, you know, we're going to be intentionally having some kind of disturbing, distressing themes because it's horror. You know, that's the point. ultimately, but we want to make sure we're doing that in a way that isn't actually or if it is making us uncomfortable, is making us uncomfortable in a good way rather than a bad way. So that's it's important. We use safety tools. The primary ones I'm sort of planning to use for this is for a start, as I said, we'll be having in a moment a discussion of lines and veils. Lines are things that we absolutely don't want to have come up in the game at all, and we will make that work. There's obviously some, as I said, some content in here that's more difficult to line than others, but we can still make it work if we need to. Veils are things where we don't want to get too in depth into stuff. So we'll either draw a just sort of fade to black if that content comes up, or we'll just describe that it happens but not describe how it happens. We might say, I'm not really happy with having like a gruesome scene of disemboweling. I'm happy to say, yeah, okay, the person was disemboweled. I don't want people making sound effects. It's that's that sort of thing. So those lines veils. I also include in here as well. I usually have a column in my lines of veils set up here for stuff that we want to have an ask first on. Basically, what this is, it's just a prompt to, just before you introduce that content in a scene, just have a very quick out of character chat. This is what I would like to take. This is the direction I'd like to take the scene in. Are people happy with that? I certainly find myself personally, there is some content where, in general, it's not that I have a problem with that content per se, but there are some situations where I might not be happy with it. So that's it's to fill that sort of role essentially. The last thing that I have on the particular sheet here, we'll go through it in a moment, but is I have a list for stuff, people to mark that they're interested in seeing, that we actually want to see, and I have marked a few things on there that are things that are likely to come up due to the nature of the game itself. Or in this case, the particular place that we're playing with. It should be noted that there is, in theory, nothing to stop us for a certain content from us having that we are interested in it. We also want to ask first, and we also want to veil it. Obviously, if something is like we are going to be veiling it, even if people are interested in it, it's probably still something we should be like not trying to like go make a beeline for, but it can still come up. The exception to this is if something is lined, it is lined. Nothing else matters, because we won't be bringing it into the game. And obviously this is also a list that you can add to. I've left some space down at the bottom if people have specific stuff that they want to get in, and bearing in mind with horror in particular, if this is the sort of thing where where like 9 times out of 10 you probably don't need to necessarily write a line in on spiders if you're not that keen on spiders. For a game like this, I would advise writing those sort of very specific phobia type things in as well, because they often get hit on, or can get hit on, if we're not aware to avoid them. The other safety tools we'll be using aside from our lines and veils are we will be using the script change tool. The script change is basically a set of like video commands that we can invoke when we want to sort of just have a control what's going on in the game. Basically, the most useful of these, in my opinion, is pause. You can call out pause at any time. This is basically just a signal for everyone to just take to break from the game briefly, and that might be for a couple of different reasons. Here it might be because you need to, the doorbell's just rung and you just say, sorry, I've just got to go and get that, I'll be back in a minute, and that's fine, we'll deal with that. It might also be just because a scene is getting quite intense and you just want a moment to like think or gather yourself or whatever. Or it might be because you just want to have a conversation about something that's coming up in the game. You might say, okay, it looks like the scene is going this way, but I don't want to see X thing. Can we avoid that? Or I think it would be really cool if this happened. Is everyone okay with that? Any of those sort of things. You can just call out a quick pause and we'll have those conversations. This game does tend to be, like I said, it tends to be a fairly, we're sort of playing kind of at the authorial level anyway, so you know, a lot of those times those conversations can happen anyway, but that pause tool is there should it be needed. We've also got fast forward, which can be used to just say, I just want to skip over this a little bit. Again, this can be like kind of representing a veil, where we just say, yeah, I don't want a big gory detail of this thing that's happening. Can we just go on? Or it might be what can happen in this game as well, particularly so the idea with a lot of the early scenes, we do a bit of investigation, we find clues, and we, you know, then sort of wrap up the scene fairly quickly after that. If we kind of feel like a scene is just getting a bit drawn out and isn't really going anywhere much, we might say, can we just sort of fast forward to like where something happens that we sort of are interested in seeing, and how that comes out, rather than spending, I mean, spending time on developing out scenes is nice as well, but you know, it's that sort of balance really. We might occasionally want to call a fast forward for that. And then rewind can be used to just say, actually, I've realized I don't like what I just said. Can we change that slightly? Or I'm not happy if we go this way. Can we just step it back a little bit so we can choose a new way to go forwards? That sort of thing. So that's rewind. There's a couple of others as well that are in the PDF that's in the shared folder. So check it over if you want. I think those are the three most useful ones. We also have the X card in play. X card's quite simple. I'm sure everyone is familiar with it, but basically the X card can be used if we just want to quickly remove something from the game that we're not happy with, any content that you would just like, can we just not have that in this game? That might be, again, because it's content that you are sensitive to and don't really want to play with, or it might just be you feel something's a bit tonally off and doesn't really fit in with what we've been establishing up to this point. Anything like that, we can just call a quick X on that and just, you know, move around it, and get not feature in the game. You can kind of let me know, or let the table know by sort of making like an X sign with your hands, by putting something in chat at the side, or by calling out just in chat. I give my usual disclaimer here. I am often flicking between various tabs. I just have a single monitor, so I might not see you know, a sign in the screen or something in chat immediately when it's done. Voice is a better way of getting my attention, certainly, but obviously if you do see, for instance, if you do see someone has just put like an X in chat, and I don't seem to have acknowledged it, then everyone else is also free to just, you know, shout at me and bring it to my attention. I won't ask you to justify why you are X carding something. There's no need for that. If you want to explain, that's cool, but you know, you don't have to. I might need to ask you to clarify what it is that you are Xing, but I won't ask you to justify why you are, and that's fine. Last thing is that's a kind of a safety tool is open door policy. This is basically just to say, if at any point you need to leave the game, whether that be for like, you know, 2 minutes to go and grab a glass of water, or for the rest of the evening because you're just not able to continue playing, that is fine. If you can let me know, just so I can manage expectations, if you're going to be gone 5 minutes, or if you're just having to leave, that is great. If you can let me know, you don't have to though. If you need to leave, you need to leave, and that is fine. Don't feel the need to hang around if there is something pressing that means you can't continue playing. So that is all of our safety tools introduced. I'm now going to pause our recording. Cool. So yeah, we have our lines and veils sorted, and next I'm just going to, like I said, I'm going to go over how the game works, essentially. So and I said for this one, if you've got, I'll just quickly put in a link to the our shared folder in here if you don't have it to hand, but if I click on the right button anyway. There's a couple of reference sheets in here that are quite useful. Both there's the one that's just called Lovecraftesque reference, and the on Ilkley Moor Baht'at PDF as well. It'll be quite certainly that second one, that one will be quite useful to have open just in the background for. It has some quite good suggestions for characters, clues, and all that sort of stuff that we can always sort of fall back on when we're doing scenes. Just for your information. But yes, so the way that this game works, as I already mentioned, we have these three roles. We have the witness, the narrator, and the watchers. The witness will be responsible for playing, for playing the role of the witness. They will say what the witness says and does. They will tell us what the witness is thinking and feeling, particularly what they fear and how they're rationalizing away the strange things that they come into contact with as we go through their story. You can introduce new details about the witness through what they do, through what they say, and what they think. What you are responsible for in a scene is you should always be you should be looking at the traits that we've established on the for the character. We'll build on those as we go through, and react to events as you think that the witness would. Just basically play them as a person. Obviously, we'll be trading this between them, so we may each come with our own sort of preconceptions, but we should try and play as close as possible to what we already know about that character, rather than trying to kind of subvert it each time someone else takes over. The thing that you should not be doing as the witness is narrating details about the environment, clues, or other characters. The role of the witness is very much to be in that one character and to be seeing the rest of the world around them. In that sense, in any individual scene, there isn't so much from the witness that sense of like a shared creation. You are much more playing in the mode of a more traditional RPG in many ways. Then the corollary to that is the narrator. So the narrator's role is to ultimately to embody the horror that we are exploring, in particular by introducing scenes. So you'll be responsible for framing scenes, saying who's there, what's going on, all that sort of stuff. You have to ensure that the scene requirements are met. Mostly what this means, until we get into the later stages of the game, is it just means that you must ensure that the witness receives a clue during the scene. And then close the scene out not long after they have done. That's sort of basically that your role to do in there. If there are any conflicts, and by conflicts we mean here, if the witness is trying to do something, if they're trying to, the sort of thing where maybe in a sort of more traditional RPG, you might call for a skill check or something like that. This is always just decided by the narrator. You get to say if the witness succeeds at what they're trying to do, or what it costs them if they, how it turns out. You kind of have that. You have that authority over the outcomes of their actions. Obviously, by and large, this should be adjudicated based on what makes sense in the story. So it's not the job to throw curveballs when you're adjudicating it. It's just saying, okay, if they're trying to climb over a wall, they should probably be able to get over the wall, unless there's a particularly, unless they're trying to escape from the haunted asylum or whatever, and it's more important that they stay in there. Then you can have to say, no, you're not able to get out. But in general, the decisions you make should be about furthering the story. Absolutely shouldn't be trying to block them from getting from finding out information, because finding out information is the point of each scene ultimately. So you can make it tricksy and difficult for them, but ultimately the aim for everyone is to just keep the story moving forwards, not frustrate the witness, and decide when the scene is over. This is quite an important role. part of it as well. By and large, said we'll get into the proper descriptions of how a scene looks in a moment, but by and large, we want to try and keep the scenes fairly concise. Like, we want to kind of exult and revel in that sort of like in the weirdness and the atmosphere, but at the same time, the focus of each scene should be finding out something more about the horror, and then when we have found out more about the horror, we move on to the next scene. So we don't want to kind of keep things spooling out too long. So enough time to kind of enjoy the atmosphere, but not but try and keep things moving at a decent pace. So we want to be bringing in a sense of sinister atmosphere, so kind of giving the spooky tale. Build on existing clues, characters, and other details, and reuse them. Obviously, at the beginning of the story, we'll be starting with creating stuff whole cloth. But once we started to get more, you want to start doing a bit of reincorporating as well to kind of hammer in on those tones we already started to establish. Give the watchers space to contribute. I'll get onto what they'll be doing in a moment. As I'm sure we are all well aware, the playing online has some obstacles when it comes to sort of collaborative conversations. So if we were playing at a table, the watcher role is a lot easier to perform because it's a lot easier to kind of just jump in partway through when someone's talking without disrupting things. What is good cues from the perspective of the narrator is just try and keep an eye on like if one of the people who's playing a watcher unmutes or like puts up their hand. Ask them if they have something to contribute, but also try and just ask the watchers some directed questions as well. If you've just described, we've come into the pub, and there's some old men drinking beer at the table. What do we see in here that shows these people are scared of an external force, Greg? And that's a problem for sort of Greg to kind of add a detail to the scene.
The talisman's wrapped around their fingers. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just be something to be aware of as a narrator is just to try and bring the watchers in as much as you can, to give them a chance to sort of add to the scenes, the narrator will also be responsible for playing NPCs in a scene, but they can also hand off playing an NPC to the watchers as well. Particularly if you would otherwise have to be, if you're playing like a couple of NPCs and you don't want to be talking to yourself, giving one of them over to a watcher is a good idea. The one like caveat I will give on that is that if your sort of primary purpose of bringing an NPC in a scene is to deliver some information to the witness, then you should be playing that NPC because you are responsible for kind of coming up with the information that's being given, so that you shouldn't be handing that sort of element of it off onto the watchers. But that's a minor thing on there. The thing that you cannot do as the narrator, you should not do as the narrator, is tell the witness what they're thinking or feeling. The reactions to what you portray are always the witnesses to make. You should not be sort of telling them, "Oh, you feel scared when you see the skeleton." Tell them they see the skeleton, and then ask them how that makes them feel. So that is the narrator. As I said, the narrator is quite similar to sort of what we might think of as a traditional GM role, really. And then finally, you have the watchers. The watchers are their sort of function is to add atmosphere to the scene, but without like dictating the direction of it. You should build on the narrator's descriptions, giving detailed texture and atmosphere. Try and answer any questions the narrator gives you. Play NPCs if asked to do. You should be following the narrator. Let them define the broad strokes of the scene and fill in with the detail on it. When you do elaborate, go all out on it. You know, really, you feel free to like give some like nice florid descriptions, because it all helps to kind of really build in that atmosphere. And the more little details we have out there, the more kind of inspiration it gives for like adding stuff later on. So do feel free when you have that opportunity to add detail, you know, go for it. That's sort of your function there. Yeah, and again, one of the general suggestions I think is good for improv stuff in general, but they specifically on here is answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Generally, it will usually be as good an answer as any other you come up with, spending 5 minutes sitting there in silence. So just go with what you think, what comes up. The things you should be, and I think the watcher is probably the role with the most important don'ts on it, is that the watcher, as a watcher, don't bring new things into a scene, or don't add anything. Don't try and add in anything that is like overtly of consequence, as it were. So if someone asks for you know, if you've sort of started setting up this description of a thing, you might say, oh yeah, there is a you know, there's a human skull sat on a shelf with like a big dribbly candle running down it, and you know, it looks like super creepy. That's cool, but you probably don't want to say, and when you open the cupboard, a skeleton falls out, because that's kind of stepping on the narrator's toes, because that's kind of bringing in a very big like moment into the scene, and that's the sort of thing you want to try and avoid. So yeah, don't try and take over the role of narrating, or push the scene into a sort of completely new direction. That's you know, it's up to, it's kind of the narrator is responsible for that, like pacing things out, and bringing in the sort of the big important details, the clue for the scene. You can, you know, those are 3 roles. What we have, so we have, this game is split into 3 parts: part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 1 always consists of 5 scenes, so we will play through 5 scenes, switching around as needed. In each of these scenes, in part 1, they are investigation scenes. The idea is that the narrator will set up the initial scene. The witness will describe what they're doing with that scene. At some point in that scene, they will come across something that is strange, unusual, out of the ordinary, and that is what's referred to as a clue. We'll record that clue, and after that clue, as I said, probably try and after that clue has been revealed, the scene should probably start winding down at that point. You know, we'll play it out as appropriate, but in general, that should be kind of, once that focal point's happened, then we can kind of wind that scene down and move on to the next one. At the end of the scene, there are a couple of things we will do. First, the first thing is that is usually the best way of doing this is just that once the actual scene is done, the narrator will just clarify the clue that they've given out. Not what it means. It's important here that these clues don't explain. They raise questions. So things like you know, a strange glowing gem that seems to whisper in your ear. That is the clue. We don't explain why it is doing that. That's for later in the game. Just the existence of that thing is the clue. And the clue can be something. It can be an object. It can be a person or creature. It can be just like behavior. So like, you know, old man Smithers has been acting strangely recently. That could be a clue. Anything like that is fine. So it's, as I said, it's usually a good idea for just at the end of the scene for the narrator to clarify this is the thing that was specifically given as a clue, just so everyone's on the same ballpark, and they can note that down on the character keeper. Then the witness will get to say how they are currently rationalizing what's going on. So, you know, it's like, oh, it was probably just a cat. It's probably fine. There's nothing weird going on here. Any of those sort of rationalizations as to what might be going on, rather than the strange reality. They will also get the opportunity to add a new trait to the list underneath the witness in our character keeper. This is just be a short thing that's something we learnt about their character in that scene they've done. And the idea of this is it just helps us to keep adding these traits, and it just helps us to build up a more coherent image of the character as we go through. So we kind of we can all play that character with a bit of consistency to them. They don't really ever have any mechanical purpose, but they're just there too. The only thing that is sort of slightly mechanical is that if in an early scene we discover that the character can pick locks, then if you're the narrator in a later scene and the character as well, I'm going to try and lockpick the door, then that should probably work because we already know they can do that. So it's that's how it can sort of work back in. But in general, those are mostly just there so that we can all play a character sort of cohesively. The final thing that we will all do is we'll go into our little tab where we've got our conclusions, and we just need to write down a couple of lines about what we think is going on. And by we, sorry, I mean here. So I would go in and I would write what I think is going on. The important thing here is we do not consult on that. We go, okay, based on the clues I've already seen, I think that this is what's going on. I think that there's a beast stalking the moors, dragging people into a cave. And the idea with this is that we write down what we think is currently going on. And obviously when it's your turn to be a narrator, then you should probably be like, the clue that you introduce should probably be kind of steering people towards what you've set up. But then after each scene, we always go back and we just spend a couple of minutes. You might say, actually, I've realized that what I thought was going on before probably isn't what's going on. And it's actually now this, or I think that the same thing is broadly going on, but now I think it's this person who's behind it rather than that person, whatever else. So Brandon.
Yeah, and I get the idea that, it's called jump to conclusions. So the idea is that you should take a wild stab at what you think it is going on in the early going, almost certainly to be proved wrong in some.
As a 12-year-old girl would. Yes.
Yeah, no,
right.
and exactly.
No, I mean,
yeah,
it's like, we found a green glowing gem. Well, clearly there's a cult near here that's using this gem to control people's minds.
Yeah.
And make them do horrible things. I mean, it's like, okay, how did you get that from a gem? Well, the answer is it's jumping to conclusions.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be logical in the sense that you have to have evidence for everything you think. You just have to have an idea of what you think might explain this. And obviously, the more clues we have out, the more cohesive that idea may become. But yeah, exactly right. It should just be a kind of like, I think it's this. I think it's aliens. It's definitely aliens. But obviously also be prepared to change your mind if the new clues make you reconsider. There is a couple of specific things that we want to be that when leaping to conclusions, there's basically 3 questions that you want to be answering, which are I'm just going to see if I can find. Yep, here we go. So the 3 things that are important to consider when you're leaping to conclusions, I should have actually edited the sheet, but are who or what is responsible for the weirdness that's going on? What are they doing? And if nothing stops them, what will be the result of what they're doing? So sort of who, what, and the future what, I suppose. How will that come out? So yeah, that's what we'll do in the scene. The scenes will resolve in broadly the same way in both part 1 and part 2, so that won't change much. Once we hit part 2, I'll touch on this properly once we actually get there, because we've got 5 things to do before then. But once we get to part 2, we will start to have the option to delve into the kind of end game of the game. I realize that's a bad turn of phrase to use there, but so in part 2 we can have up to 3 scenes, or I suppose technically up to 4 scenes, but the last scene is a little bit different. But we won't necessarily have all of them, but we might have some. We'll have at least one. The final, and then part 3 is very different, so I will save that till we get there, or at least until we get closer. The other thing, and I will actually just bring up a quick link. So everyone will have what is referred to as a special card. These are basically, they give you a specific permission to do something in the game, and they will explain themselves on the card. You'll see in the tab you have a little drop down next to where it says special card in your own personal tab. Oops, I'm in someone else's, but where you can select the card. I'll get onto giving out these cards in a moment, but you get to pick one of them. Well, you can choose from the drop down list the card that you have been given. Is probably the best way of putting it. And when you do that, it will give you a little view of the card. I have chosen one I've chosen one of the ones that we won't be using in this game. So I've chosen that in my little in my own personal tab. If I now go onto my column in the character keeper, you'll see there's a little tick box there that says special card. I'm going to click that, and now my card will be revealed. This is basically for when you play it. You'll see there are two main forms of these special cards. There are ones that are called instant effect cards and ones that are called ongoing effect cards. The one I've put in here at the moment is an ongoing effect card. And you'll see it gives it has a trigger. So before you can play this card, the thing that is described as that trigger must have taken place in a scene. So it says you may play this card after a scene that included the complete or partial remains of an unknown creature. So if we discover, some strange skeletons up on the moors, then after that scene is finished, you can play this card. And this card now lets you break. I've realized I haven't yet introduced our rules of creeping horror, but this card lets you do stuff that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. And sorry, I should say it lets the whole table. Once this card has been played, it is now in effect for everybody. You'll see that for this one, for instance, it says from part 1 onwards, you can now reveal clear but indirect evidence of a creature unknown to science. So we can now start having a weird creature that we actually see indirect evidence of. In part 2, you can now see something that could be the creature but obscured through the mist, your typical cryptid photo. And also reveal terrible effects on the victim, injury, mutilation, and or death. So these are basically exceptions to our normal rules that we play with, and normally you would not be able to do those things. The other type of card, I'm just going to quickly flip into my tab, is the, I'm going to see what I think is right. So the flashback card. So this one is different. This is an instant effect card. This says play this card during part 1 or 2 to become narrator if you weren't already. Initiate a new flashback scene to a time before the current story started, which is an investigation scene as normal, and reveal a clue that is relevant to the current situation in this flashback scene. So this lets you basically jump in and have a turn as narrator when it wouldn't normally be, or you can play it before your normal narrator turn if it just lets you do something different. I'll get onto how we resolve what happens after that later, but those are basically the two types of card. Good, yes. Just seeing this thing about zooming in on them. So yeah, that's cool. They are also in. Actually, I'll unhide that.
Well, they're a lot bigger in your personal tab as well.
They are. I also have them in. Bear with me one second while I look it up. I can't remember where you keep hidden sheets. Here we go.
All of the cards seem to be on the Lovecraftesque reference sheet.
Yes, all the cards are on there. You'll see I've just unhidden the data tab. This also just has the wordings on all the cards just in plain text as well, if you want to refer to it rather than see it on the card. So those are they. So yeah, as I said, the ongoing. So this brings me back. And sorry, the one thing I had forgotten to mention up to this point. The problem with this game is not actually that complicated, but because quite a lot of stuff is sort of layered into each other, it's always choosing where to start describing any one piece. But yeah, so what we'll be playing with as well, and this is particularly important to the narrator of any one scene, is we are playing with the rule of creeping horror, which is a set of commands, which is basically, until the final horror scene, it is against the rules to introduce anything blatantly supernatural, any clear threat to the witness, or any direct evidence of violence. The exception to this is unless it is permitted by a special card. So once those special cards have started to come out to the table, we'll basically see more and more weirdness coming into the narration. That's the idea. Obviously, if for any good power gamers will have spotted, if you have one of those ongoing effect cards that has a trigger when a certain thing happens, the best thing to do is, if you are the narrator, have that thing happen, and then you can play your card. So it's that is intended. That's the point. It's there to give you an idea of something you might build on to introduce the scene when you're a narrator, if you have one of those cards. If you have one of the instant effect cards, it's obviously a little bit different. I'd say don't feel bad about playing the instant effect card if it would interrupt someone else's thing. Some of them times you can actually play them like partway through a scene, and again that will have slightly messy, not messy bad, but just messy. We'll have a quick chat about what happens after that scene's been played. But essentially, narration will tend to go back to the person that's narrating already, or the person whose next turn it would be to narrate anyway. So you're not really stealing someone's turn as such, but it will have a bit of an effect on how we play through. But don't shy off of using them, but also at the same time, I think I often find with those instant effect cards, if it doesn't immediately do something you think is really cool, then don't feel bad about not using them. I think the ongoing effect cards are have a much more of a shape on the play of the game in general. Cool. So I think hopefully that has given everyone a quick overview of what we will be doing, how to play the game, what we'll be looking at in each scene. I'm going to take our first break now. Well, if we say come back about 20 past, so give you a chance to have a quick break, digest all of that, and obviously if at this point you want to sort of go over the reference sheets and the playset sheet as well, feel free to do so when you're done taking a break. But yeah, I'll see you all in a moment. So yeah, right, we know where we are now. We've chosen our secret cards. We have a little chat about what the how those work. So with that said and done, we'll get into a quick discussion or description of our playset. Well, actually, what I'll do probably, if people have this in front of them, I will read out. I'll explain what the playset is and give the very intro bit. And I might just ask other people to just read through a couple of the bits, just so it's someone other than me speaking for a moment. So yeah, as I said, this particular playset is called on Ilkley Moor Baht'at, which is by Becky Anderson, who also wrote the game. We had this discussion already, but on Ilkley Moor Baht'at is a folk song sung in Yorkshire dialect, local to West Yorkshire, where Ilkley Moor is. Sort of mentioned this actually where my partner comes from, or nearby Ilkley anyway, not actually in Ilkley itself. So yeah, that's a fun little coincidence there. But the song on Ilkley Moor Baht'at in Old Yorkshire dialect means on Ilkley Moor without a hat. And the story of the song is basically a young man goes up, euphemistically phrased as courting his love Mary Jane without a hat, and catches his death of cold while up there, to be eaten, he dies, is buried up on the moor, is eaten by worms. Worms eat the ducks, and then his friends eat the duck. That's it. Basically, it's usually sung in kind of a. We had a little discussion on the song, but it's usually sung in kind of around. And yeah, it's a fairly sort of enduring old folk song. But that is where the name comes from. Just a little bit of colour there. So the game is, as I said, it is set in the village of Ben Rhydding, which is on the edge of Ilkley Moor. Ben Rhydding is actually, and a couple of places referenced in here are actually real places. So yeah, Ben Rhydding is a little village up on Ilkley Moor, and that's where the game will be set. As I said, it is sorry, I lost my train of thought. So yeah, I'll introduce the witness first. As I said, this is set in during World War II. Our witness is Effie Williams. She is a 12-year-old girl from London. Her little brother David was killed in the Blitz, and 3 months ago she was sent to the village of Ben Rhydding at the edge of Ilkley Moor. Effie's source of strength. So the source of strength is basically a sort of key feature about the character, and something that kind of they draw on, and their personality trait is just something a little bit about how they are. So her source of strength is a sense of adventure, and her personality trait goes unnoticed. So yeah, just we don't need to get too much into the actual historical accuracies and all this, but for anyone who isn't familiar, obviously during the Blitz in World War II, well, both before and after, in fact, the actual key Blitz years, but a lot of children from London in particular, but other large cities in general, were evacuated from the cities they lived in to live with people out in the countryside, where obviously the rationale was they would be a lot safer from bombings, because they would much less regularly be targeted by the Germans. Sadly, this was not always the case, but in general, it was a plan to get them out of London, which was one of the high priority targets in particular. They would be sent to live with families there. Families sent to live with people. They're not necessarily people who actually had families, not people who were parents, not people who necessarily had any interest whatsoever in having children around. They would be just assigned a place where they would live, their billet, and they would be expected to stay there with that person, with that family. So yeah, that's kind of the framing device to this. World War II is going on. Effie has been sent from London out to this little village up in West Yorkshire, where she will be staying. So what I'm going to do, what we have in here is in the little playset, we have in here some suggested characters and some suggested locations. These are kind of features of what we'll be playing with that people can draw, and we don't have to use them necessarily, but they are there to be used if people want to. So I'm going to ask, going around in character keeper order, so starting with Brandon, if you'd like to read out the first character, then Greg the next, and so on. We'll just do the characters first, and then we'll go on to the next bit, the locations.
Miss Phillida Bailey is the lady who Effie is billeted with. Phillida is a private person, often busy with the land girls, who, as I understand, are basically people who are doing national service out in the countryside.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
who may or may not be anywhere from the countryside, and kind of perfectly likely to be from cities, but they've been assigned out in the countryside to do important work, like getting food together for the war effort. Miss Phillida takes little interest in what Effie gets up to and is often bad-tempered with her. Lately, she has been preoccupied with some contaminated land up at Oakland's farm.
Brilliant, thank you.
Corporal Claude Bell is an African-American soldier stationed nearby. He is a kind and gentle man who doesn't seem suited for war and would rather be back with his family. Since conducting army exercises on Ilkley Moor, he has become withdrawn and distant.
Mr. Frederick Hamilton, former manager at the Hydro, was turned down for the Army for unknown reasons. Recently, his health has deteriorated, and he's a constant visitor to the doctor. He covers himself in layers and scarves, even on the hottest days.
And finally, Martha Jones is a maid at the former Hydro. We'll get onto exactly what that is in a moment. She is still engaged by the Wool Control Board to do a little cleaning. She was a vibrant, young, bright-eyed woman, but since the Wool Control Board took over, she keeps quiet with a haunted look in her eyes. And the Wool Control, so again, a little aside, sort of not much importance, but the this area of the of West Yorkshire, there is a lot of sheep farming going on there. The Wool Control Board is presumably some sort of government thing to control the production of wool during the war effort. So I'll just go onto our locations now. So so yeah, as I said, Ben Rhydding is a picturesque town in the West Riding of Yorkshire. It was made famous in the Victorian period for its exceptional hydropathic spa establishment, which is basically just a big hotel that at one point had, like, you know, Turkish baths and all those other sort of things that the Victorians like to have. But currently it's 1942 and rationing, wartime conditions and the shadow of Hitler are grinding and relentless. The tourists are gone, the men have been conscripted, and the town is an empty place.
The Hydra Hotel and golf course, once the epitome of Victorian Gothic style, the Hydro is crumbling. It closed shortly after the war began and was taken over by the, quote, Wool Control Board, unquote. Now almost deserted, it casts a long and grim shadow over the town.
Ilkley Moor, a forbidding place. I believe it meant foreboding. A foreboding place, bleak and exposed. It stretches for miles, covered in low shrubs and garland in purple heather and hidden treachery. Sticky bogs suck down sheep, and blinding fog can descend instantly and last for days.
The 12 Apostles, a prehistoric stone circle on Ilkley Moor. There are 12 remaining stones, which all lie prone on the heather. The circle adjoins a series of barrows, ancient burial sites that dot the surrounding countryside.
And finally, Oakland's farm, the closest farm to the moor, it is lonely and isolated, and even the land girls refuse to spend the night there. Some of the animals have been suffering a strange infectious skin condition. No one knows the cause. Okay, so there's obviously those special cards I've already mentioned that we'll have in play. There's also on the final page there are a list of sample clues. So if you're narrating a scene, and at any point, you know, you don't have a strong idea in mind of what you want, always feel free to dip into those clues. Just pick one off there and use and run with it if you want. They are there to be used. You know, do not feel that you have to come up with a sparkling idea all of your own if you're not coming up with anything. At the same time, do not feel bound by the clues that are there, and feel free to come up with your own stuff. But just be aware that they are there for your use if you want. Also on the reference sheet towards the end of that as well, there are some kind of various inspiration tables for clues. They're a lot more sketchy rather than being, you know, like concrete ideas, but feel free to kind of browse through those and if, you know, if something sparks your imagination, that's great. So yeah, that is kind of our initial setup. We have our, as I said, we have our witness, Effie, who's currently defined by her sense of adventure and the fact that she tends to go unnoticed. We will begin our first scene. So I am happy to narrate for the first scene. although if someone has a burning desire to do so, I'm happy to cede to them, but I'm more than happy to take this first scene myself, just so we can kind of get into things, if that is okay with people. Yeah, cool. So I have got so again, see on the play sheet, there's little tick boxes for which role you are currently in. It will always read like the first one you've got ticked, just because that's, that was the limit of my programming in Excel at the time. But the way we work with this is the player to the left of the narrator is the witness. So in this first scene, I will be the narrator and Mike will be the witness. Brandon and Greg for this first scene will be watchers. After the scene, we will all pass our roles to the left. So for the following scene, Mike will be narrator, Greg will be witness, me and Brandon will be watchers, etc., etc. If we have one of the cards come up that like interrupts the flow of things, we'll deal with that, and as it comes up, that's that. So, without further ado, as there has been much so far. Yeah, I think it's like getting on for evening. The sun is not yet started to properly set, but it's definitely on the way down. The much like the view we currently have behind Mike. It's a fairly grey and overcast day. But not too cold, not too wet, just slightly miserable. And I think that Effie has been, maybe roaming the edges of the moors, out somewhere near Oakland's farm. I don't think that I don't think that Phillida, Miss what's her surname? Sorry, Miss Bailey. I don't think that she brought you out here, but I think that she maybe followed her out here, she's been Phillida Bailey is probably in her 50s. It's got kind of steel grey hair pulled back into quite a tight bun. She's wearing kind of hard wearing clothes. She's a local to the village. She has a small holding farm of her own, but has been working in bigger stuff since the Land Girls and stuff have been up here. But she's out here at Oakland's farm, and she has been. You can see that she's sort of like digging some holes in a patch of ground with that's kind of dark. The grass around here is that kind of like curled up, almost looks like it's been burnt. But she's sort of like digging around in the trowel with a trowel. So yeah, Effie, what are you up to?
So Miss Bailey has come out here to as part of her work with the Land Girls. She's got something going on, and Effie just kind of tagged along because she doesn't really have much else better to do. so while Miss Bailey is doing this, Effie is kind of like going off, like looking around, just kind of like looking at the moors, and decides to like, decides to walk into the moors a little ways, just to she's got a bit of sense. She's feeling adventurous, is going out here to try to see what there is to what might be interesting out here.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and so I'm pretty certain that is actually the I thought so, because I think that's the same picture I used for the sign up. I think that is actually Ilkley Moor behind you there, so a very good visual reference. So you've got this sort of like bracken and heather all over, with kind of like rolling hills in the background. And I think as you are kind of you sort of see that you kind of poking around at the edge of the moors, you probably see like the odd rabbit scurrying across in the background. Greg, I'm going to ask, there's an odd smell in the air, something a bit out of place. What is it?
It's actually a cloyingly sweet smell. It's like caramel almost, but it has this metallic taste when you breathe it in too deeply.
Huh, that's weird. I wonder what that is. I don't know. I guess there must be some kind of weird flower out here that must have that scent. So at that, when she notices this odd smell, Effie basically follows her nose. She's like trying to figure out which direction the smell is most strong, and is going to go in that direction.
Yeah, I think it's you start heading out off a little away from the actual like agricultural land around here, over a little dry stone wall. But it's definitely around the area where this field that Miss Bailey is looking at. Yeah, you can definitely smell it stronger here, and that kind of metallic-y, it's like an unpleasant taste. But it's definitely getting a bit stronger around here. You can see some of the kind of the bracken around here. Again, it's that kind of just slightly curled up and looks a little unhealthy in general. I think that I'm gonna ask Brandon. What's like another sign we see here that just like the local plant life isn't doing well?
There are Effie wanders around the grass and comes to a place where there is a hollow in the earth, just a dimple a couple of feet deep, that is entirely barren of plant life. And as she looks around a little more, she notices that there's not just one of these, that they're scattered across the hillside that she's looking at. These little empty patches that are that seem to be mild depressions in the earth.
Yeah, that's
the
nice.
the earth is crumbly under her fingers, with but bits of it stick together almost like caramel.
Yeah, I was going to say that sweet scent is definitely stronger in these like patches of like collapsed earth, or depressed earth. What does Effie do?
Well, this is curious. When she sees the first, she does see she sees this first depression and thinks it's odd that this like weird sweet smell is coming from it. And then when she looks around and she sees other depressions farther out in the moor, her curiosity is certainly piqued. She is going to like kneel down in the grass next to this hollow depression, and is going to like reach out and I guess scoop up some of this earth, feel it in her fingers, and then maybe smell it just to see if this is indeed what's the source of this strange scent.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's as sort of Brandon mentioned, it's got that kind of almost stickiness to the soil. It's kind of clumping together and sort of can feel it. It's also just like very, very slightly warm, not like warmer than you might expect. Certainly, kind of almost like compost. It's that sort of just a little warmer than the soil you would normally expect it to be. And that smell is absolutely stronger and absolutely coming from these patches of soil. And as you kind of get this handful of soil up, you can see underneath this like oddly smooth. It looks like part way between like fungus and a slug. It's got that kind of like smooth but like slightly shiny, slightly odd, and it seems to be doesn't seem to be moving, it doesn't seem to be alive in the sense that it's a slug, but it's definitely, and well, certainly the bit that you've exposed, it looks quite, it's probably maybe as it's got the curvature on it that it looks like it's maybe like as wide around as like Effie's fist, and it's like I said, maybe a root, maybe a fungus, maybe something else. But yeah, it's certainly odd, and maybe Effie isn't the most experienced person with like agriculture and the like, but it's got that like strange look to it. It's just not something that she's ever seen before.
Effie being a 12-year-old girl that's encountered something odd in nature, she's going to resort to human nature and looks around to see if she can find a stick or a twig or something, and then she's going to poke it with a stick.
Yeah, and I think as she pokes it, it's a bit resistant. Again, it has that like fungusy texture to it. It's kind of
almost rubbery.
Exactly, it's kind of rubbery and stuff until the point it very much isn't, and it just like the stick goes into it and it just like dissolves into this thick, goopy, yellowy browny mess, and that's the scent gets more intense, but you can really taste that horrible, like real like blood in the mouth sort of metallic thing as this comes out. Yeah, it's unpleasant, to say the least.
Ew. So she pulls a stick, so she was poking the thing and it resisted, and then it just went all the way through. When she realizes that it doesn't, that it suddenly gave, she's going to like poke it just to see if there's a bottom to it. I mean, she's not going to get it down to her. I mean, she's not going to touch it with her hand because that's just disgusting. She's going to like poke to see how deep this thing is, and then like when she either finds the bottom or doesn't, I don't know how long her stick is. I don't imagine it's more than a foot long or so. She'll then withdraw it, and then holding it away from her is just going to look at whatever goo is dripping off the edge of the stick, and is also looking at the stick to see if it's doing anything weird.
Yeah, certainly. So I think yeah, the all of the soil under here where she's poking down definitely has that same sort of spongy, sticky consistency to it. Certainly as far down as she can push, it definitely seems to be something that's happening from underneath the ground. rather than sort of from the surface down, at least as far as you can see at the minute. And I think the this like goopy stuff kind of, it's got that kind of like treacle like consistency. It just like very slowly drips off down the stick. But yeah, it's strange and odd. And I'm going to I'll ask Brandon this time. What do we see? What do we see Miss Bailey doing, just sort of like in the background? And this may not even be something that Effie notices, but just something that's sort of going on in there. And how do we know that she's basically forgotten that Effie was here?
All right. Miss Bailey picks herself up and dusts off her apron, essentially. Puts away her garden tools. Takes out her watch. And then nods her head and begins to make her way down the hillside.
Nice. Greg, just from like what we hear or see, how do we know that that Effie is probably the only person out here on the moors?
Yeah, as Miss Bailey goes over the hill with her gardening tools, the sun is setting even more, and the sort of a night fog rolls in the distance. It's not quite to Effie yet, and in the distance we hear a wolf howling.
Nice. Cool. And so I think this is probably where I'm going to call this scene now, but I'm just going to ask, as we do, what's sort of Effie doing? She by this point she's probably noticed that Miss Bailey has gone or is going, but yeah, what does Effie do?
So I think Effie was a bit fascinated by this like strange smelling goo stuff, but as soon as that the real unpleasant part of the smell hits her nostrils, and that's when she realizes okay, she's a city girl. She never really lived in the country, but she certainly read books about that, and she'd never read anything like this. She like drops the stick, and it like lands in the depression next to the rubbery mushroom tuber thing, whatever it was. Just kind of like falls with a splat. At that, she like looks around and decides that perhaps it would be best to go back. And that's when she notices that one, she doesn't see what was her name again? She doesn't see Miss Bailey, and isn't entirely sure where she went. And two, now that this fog is rolling in, she's not in. Since she's walked into the moor, the sun's gone down, the fog's rolling in. She now isn't exactly sure which direction it is back into town.
Nice. So, cool. We will bring that scene to a close. So, yeah, the just for clarity, as mentioned, the clue that I'm going to write down for this one is strange fungus growing on the moors. And that's sort of the clue for this one. We can all now take a moment just to leap to conclusions and write down what we think might be going on. And Mike, if you would like to tell, well, I think we already have an idea of how Effie is rationalizing this, because it's like that sort of like, well, this seems odd, but at the same time, it's not. Maybe this is normal for here, you know. But if you'd like to write down a trait that you think Effie has demonstrated in this scene, and that can be anything, but just something you think that kind of gives us an idea about her.
Okay, I think the trait that it kind of goes hand in hand with her sense of adventure. I think the trait she has exposed is curiosity. I'm going to write that down.
Perfect. So unless now everyone, we can just take a couple of minutes just to leap to conclusions and write something down. I'll check in either type OK when you're done, or I'll just check in a couple of minutes anyway. Sorry, I didn't manage to unmute myself there. So yeah, I think we're all done. And I also see, thank you, someone has updated the roles. So nice job on that. So yeah, we will have our next scene now. So now it's Mike to start with narrating. So once again, you get to introduce the scene.
It does. Oh, it goes in the other direction. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, it goes to the it goes to the left. That's right.
Okay.
I think last time I ran this online, I did it to the right because it makes slightly more sense on paper rather than in person. But yeah.
So why does it go to the left? Never mind.
Well, it's the way.
Wintershins is evil.
I was going to say when you play a game when you play a board game, turn generally passes to your left, but.
Yeah, I think that's where it comes from. But yeah, on the screen it seems the wrong way around. It's but yeah. I did keep that just because.
Right.
Okay.
On the screen,
okay.
And, we're all speakers of English, and we read right to left.
I may. I'll jump the scene I had in mind.
Okay, give me a moment.
Oh no.
Okay. So, so the sun is set. It's actually a rather pretty sunset, but or at least the sky is turning a pretty color. Although it's kind of hard to see the horizon with fog that's now rolling in as it's getting dark. So I'm going to ask. So Effie, what does Effie do with this now that I'm going to say Effie does? I think we've established Effie doesn't exactly know which direction she was supposed to go in. So what does Effie do now that this fog is rolling in and that she's kind of lost her sense of direction?
So so Effie has dropped the stick long ago. She's made her way up to one of the higher parts, or maybe even climbed partway up a tree, let's say. And she's trying to look around for Miss Bailey because she was just, or was it? Oh, Miss Bailey, Miss Bailey. She's looking around and not hearing anything in response, I would think.
Okay, so the so Effie calls out into the darkness from this hilltop, and again, it's really starting to get dark, and this fog is really starting to roll in. It's at this time. It's at this time that she notices on the other. She's climbed up one side of the hill. She notices on the other side of the hill now that she's looking down. Fog isn't quite, because she's on the top of the hill, and the fog is like filling up from the valleys. So she does have a slightly better vantage point from here, but again, it's very hard to see since there's not. It's kind of featureless. But she looks down the other side of the hill, and as a narrator, I am going to reveal my special card.
Oh dear.
I am going to reveal my special card of a strange location. In the side of this hill, looking down, you wouldn't probably be able to see it from the ground level because of the way the underbrush has grown, but she sees what looks like almost a cave opening that opens up into the side of the hill on the side opposite from the one that she climbed up. Brandon, what about this cave opening, or what about this opening in the side of the hill is particularly enticing?
Just above the opening of the hill is a standing stone that is once a standing stone that's now lying down. And Effie realizes that this is the opening to a barrow, an ancient burial,
just like in the books.
And David, so that was enticing. What is foreboding about this?
I think it's got that you can already tell just from sort of looking in from the outside, or from where you can see that this, where the barrow drops down, or this cave entrance drops down, it's clear that it's like very dark inside. Like it's sort of the way it overhangs, and the fact that like it does seem to like maybe drop off a little as it goes down. It's almost certainly like it's almost certainly going to be very, very dark in there.
Effie's not scared of a little darkness. She's 12 now.
So what is Effie doing here?
Yeah, she climbs down from the tree on this hilltop, and she's going to make her way. I mean, this is a walkable distance. This isn't like super far away, right? She could see it. So she's gonna make her way. At least she has a landmark now. She may not be able to find Miss Bailey, but she makes her way towards the opening of this cave. Hello?
Okay. Effie's
Hello?
Effie's voice echoes through it.
Hello?
In almost as if in response, off in the distance, she hears a wolf cry again. What does Effie do?
Oh, I mean,
This wolf cry sounded a bit closer than
the last one. Miss Bailey, you didn't. And she'll look around for maybe she's packed something away in a bag, and she'll find a torch, and she'll start shining it into the bushes nearby, looking.
Okay, sure, yeah, you're an adventurous. You are an adventurous.
It's really cool. It's one of the ones you have to shake, and it turns on for a little bit, and then it dims really quickly.
I was going to say, like,
are those World War II appropriate? Maybe it has a crank.
I was going to say, I don't think either would necessarily be appropriate. It probably uses a couple. I mean, it's probably just battery operated.
There you go.
I don't know how short supply batteries were in England in the Second World War, but
you have to hit it a couple times. It's one of those.
Yeah, something like that. So yes, you have a big electric torch, and you shine it about. You don't really see much in the bushes, other than this fog is definitely rolling in. It's definitely getting higher up the hill, and you shine. Are you looking into the cave or not?
Yeah, I think if she doesn't see anything in the bushes, she will shine it into the cave.
Okay, shining it into the cave. So it looks like so now that you're at the level of the cave, you see that there, I guess, had been some kind of like large stone that had been over the opening that has been pushed aside. Shining it in, there are like carved into the rock. This is clearly not an. I mean, you're a city girl. You don't really know this too much, but you know chisel marks when you see this. This isn't a cave. Someone has carved this, and it's also really, really old. And there are stairs that go into the ground. And finally, when you shine it upward, carved into the back of the wall. No, not carved. Painted in this like red, like somewhere between like red, brown, ochre color, is a stylized figure. It looks like a man, but it has like antlers coming out of its head.
I think if she catches that in the light just right, she might let out like a big scream, like there's someone in here. And maybe that's when Miss Bailey comes. Hopefully, she's really hoping after she screams that Miss Bailey shows up.
I'm gonna say no, Miss Bailey, but
No.
like looking at like shining the light on this like scary looking like petroglyph. When Effie screams, that sounds like a good end of scene.
Yeah, excellent.
And so for the clue, I'm going to say petroglyph of antler-headed man.
So now we jump to conclusions again.
I'm not sure about the game mechanics, so I'm just breaking. So when I introduced this like strange place, does that itself count as a clue or not?
No, it does not. Though it's the clue. The clue itself. The clue itself you reveal is normal. Obviously, if you had interrupted, someone else's scene with this, then we would have done some jimming around at the end. But because you just sort of essentially played it as your normal scene,
I played it as a normal scene just because I felt that since I had the card, I was figuring that this would probably go beyond what since we haven't really thrown anything weird yet. This gave me license to throw something weird.
Exactly. That was a nice use of it. So yeah, no, thank you. Cool. So yeah, I will just quickly type up my conclusions. Yeah, I think I've got my conclusion sorted. Oh, and Greg as well. What do you think?
Oh yes.
Yeah, what do you think?
You know, we out of curiosity, I think I played that up. Let's see. I'm totally open to ideas if anyone has something. I'm just drawing a blank right now.
What is the question?
Oh, a trait for Effie after the last little thing. Yeah. Just anything that we need to carry through.
Not afraid of the dark.
Yeah.
Not afraid. Yes, she is not afraid of the dark.
Oh, by the way, the dino torches, those are World War II.
Cool.
Excellent.
Cool.
They were used. They were used in just about every country, and they were in fact used in a lot of. They were promulgated during World War II because batteries were precious.
Yeah.
Because the materials for batteries were so important. So yeah, you had to crank them continuously in order to keep the light on.
And it would probably make sense that a torch that's been given to a girl that's most likely going to be used for getting to an air raid shelter or something would be something fairly yeah. They're Phillips made one, but they were available to everywhere in the in Europe and the Americas. And let me just finish my thing.
Yep. Let me know when you're ready. I've got mine.
I just had to say and then see above.
Perfect. Perfect. So the next scene we have, I think we see Effie in the back of a car. It's the next day, and if we're all okay with it, she's got like a thermometer in her mouth. Is that because she was out in the rain, and much to Miss Bailey's consternation, she's now afraid that she has a cold, and damn it if the war board won't be on me if the kid gets sick. So Miss Martha Jones is taking Effie to the doctor's office in town. Mike, it's wartime. Who is the doctor at the and why are they not super qualified for this job?
The doctor of this town is named his name is Reginald Tilsdale, and he has come out of retirement. He is in his late 70s. He retired ages ago, but because of the war and because of the call up of medical personnel for the army. Every medical person with a medical background basically got conscripted to help with the war effort. So many doctors who had retired, 10 or 20 years ago, or have come out of retirement to fill in.
So Effie, Martha drops you off at the doctor's office, ushers you inside, and she says, sit. You will sit, and you will wait to be called, and I have shopping to do, so I will be back in an hour. And she leaves. What do you do?
I'm not a little kid. And I'm not sick. I just got my head wet. Just because I was out on the moor without a hat doesn't
David,
mean I'm going to get sick. I sit and fidget, waiting for the doctor.
David,
It's
the
probably old and
orderly
he smells.
Yes, there's terrible antiseptic smells in this place.
And iodine. Oh God, they always end up with an excuse to use iodine.
David, could you play the orderly for Reginald?
Yeah, sure thing. I think I'm going to say nurse in the very loose sense of the word is the absolute opposite end of the scale to Reginald. She's 16. She probably has had some training. She has certainly been given an ill-fitting uniform, and she kind of comes up and is sort of checking through. She's just sort of helping an older lady out of the front door of the clinic, and then comes back in, and she just looks down at the sort of clipboard she's carrying and says, Effie Williams.
Says Effie, who still has a thermometer in her mouth. Nods. Finally, she nods with a sullen manner.
Okay, so come with me, and we'll take you in to see the doctor. This way, please.
And
Effie
Effie,
pulls the thermometer out of her mouth and looks at the temperature.
It's a healthy 98.7 degrees. Effie, as you're going back to see Dr. Tilsdale.
Wait, this is Britain.
Yes?
Shouldn't it say 37?
Not back
you know.
then.
Oh no!
I
beg your
I
pardon.
have no idea when Britain switched to the metric system.
Yeah.
Very well in my lifetime, to be honest.
No, they're still if there was an imperial temperature system, they'd still be using it at this point.
Yeah.
So you're heading back. You smell that iodine, that antiseptic, and the orderly is leading you back to Dr. Tilsdale, and Dr. Tilsdale opens the door, and right behind him is Mr. Frederick Hamilton. He's leaving the doctor, and he sees you. And as he sees you, he lifts up his shirt very quickly, and you catch the slightest glimpse of his lower jaw.
Do you mean he covers up something that was uncovered?
Yes.
Okay, I scream.
As you scream, he rushes back into the room. And what you saw were these gashes, these long, almost gill-like slits from his lips down underneath his neckline.
I keep screaming.
And the orderly rushes you off into a different room.
What was the matter with that man? Did he looked like he fell into a machine or something?
I think it's a skin condition of some sort. Don't worry. The doctor is taking good care of him. He'll be fine, and it's nothing you need to worry about. We
Oh
shouldn't
my
say.
God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
You shouldn't say things like that about people. It's not his fault.
It's still.
Although then she will actually kind of.
Do you have a handkerchief?
Of course, and she'll pull out a handkerchief and hand it to you, but then she will sit down and say, "I know it's a bit of a shock. It put me right about when I first saw it. It's but the doctor says he'll be okay. He'll get better, I'm sure."
I think that's actually a great part just to end the scene there. I think we're happy.
Sure. So yeah, the other thing to just need to ask from Brandon, if you would like to give us another trait for Effie, if there's something you can think of.
Yeah. Let's see now. A good way to put this. I don't want to make her. I'm not. No, I don't. There's the big thing in that scene, was how hideous she found the altered form of
Mr. Hamilton.
Mr. Hamilton, and I think there's a word for the fear of deformation, I think, but I don't know what it is. But so I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, sure thing.
She is frightened of deformity.
Yep.
Did I violate the rule of revealing something too early?
I don't think so. It was because it's weird, but it's not unexplicable.
Well, that's why I had her. That's why I had her explain it.
Yeah.
I mean, she doesn't know what skin conditions could be like. For her, it looked like that he had fallen into a thresher. That somehow only, that only would be part of him. But
yeah.
And she got the merest glimpse of it. So
yeah, exactly. No, I think that was fine. Like I said, it's cool. So we'll have our next scene now. So this time it is Brandon to narrate, and I will be the witness.
Okay. So Effie, after being sent home from the infirmary, the next day is involved with some of the land girls who are packing baskets full of cabbages. Something refreshingly mundane and ordinary. And comes the end of the day, and the land girls have a couple of the land girls have a brief argument as to who to take Effie back, because one of them is supposed to do that, notwithstanding that she's 12 years old and can perfectly well take care of herself in this regard.
Yeah.
So they say, I don't want to go all the way back there. I'll just drop her off at the hydro, and Martha will take her home when she gets off shift. And so Effie finds herself parked in the what used to be the lobby of the hydro, and is now kind of just a shabby anteroom. And functionary that she sees briefly just has glared at her and told her to, stay where she is and mind her business. And because there are important things going on in this building, and they mustn't be disturbed.
Yeah.
And he leaves.
Yeah. The second he turns his back, she'll stick out her tongue at him. She'll sort of sit in like the chair she's been put in for sort of kicking her heels.
God, it's boring.
Sort of sit there kicking her heels for about a minute, and then she'll sort of get up and just do that sort of craning her sort of almost her whole body around to
There's a long corridor going in both directions from this antechamber, and there's absolutely no one in it, nor has there been anyone in it since she was parked in a chair and admonished to stay still.
Yeah, I think she'll kind of skip down the corridor in that direction. Kind of doing that, like almost using the the sort of parquet floor like a hopscotch thing, just for something to do.
This plaything is full of fascinating rooms. She comes to one that looks like a giant shower room, except that it has it's a tiled enclosure that's about 8 by 8, and it has big valves on 3 walls, and these huge shower head looking things that project out with nozzles that stick out of the walls, and these big giant watering can looking things that crane over the central bit, and a huge slotted drain in the middle of the floor.
Yeah, so I think she's going to head into the room, and kind of probably get one of the big valves sort of like in both hands and sort of try and turn it and see if it will give.
Okay, and with an enormous creak, it gives, and water, it starts to gush out of one of the giant watering can fixtures up on the ceiling, with startling force and volume.
Can I throw just a piece of flavor in here?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. And then what about
on top
this
of the
water?
shower heads? There's sort of like, there's lots of different fixtures you could buy. These have a very antler-like build to them.
Well, I said they do. The water that comes, there's obviously something about the pipes, because the water that comes out has a certain quality to it. What is it?
Mike's
got a cat.
Mike,
so
yeah.
This is so good.
Do you want to take that one, Mike? The quality of the water that comes out of the pipes?
Quality of the water that comes out of the pipe. Oh, yeah. It's so the water is perfectly clear, but the smell of the mist from the the smell of the water has an ever so faint scent, like faintly sweet scent, almost like caramel. But there's a bit of there's just a bit of a metallic taste in the back of her mouth. Like, this is a much fainter scent of what the weird mushroom was, what that weird mushroom smelled like.
Sure thing, yeah. And I think as the water sort of starts coming down, she's going to kind of try and get the valve closed back off again.
Okay, and this is only partially successful. She manages to throttle some of it off, but it's still pouring water down at a nice clip. And and it's starting to fill the room with with moisture and steam and such like that, and soak the hem of her dress.
Yeah, so I think she's going to do the responsible thing, and back out of the room, and close the door, and carry on down the corridor.
Yes. Okay. The next thing she passes in a corridor is a doorway that's got smoked glass in it, so she can see that there's a light in there. It's got a glass panel in it, so that she can see there's a light in there, but she can't see actually anything in there. She can hear, however, that there is a spirited argument that is taking place in there, and bits and pieces of what people are saying filter right out into the corridor.
Yeah, and I think she's going to lean, cup her ear against it so she can hear better.
Of course she is. So, Mike, if you'll be the or Greg, either who raise your hand, someone to be the other interlocutor. Greg, okay.
Sure.
Okay, Greg. There's an argument going on about something, a vague undertaking where things are not turning out as they might have, and there's a question as to whether or not continuing in the vein is a good idea. And I'll start. We just don't have enough data. Unless we use this on further subjects, it'll be impossible to tell whether or not it's useful.
We have enough data. Your model is flawed. Your model is flawed. Your approach is flawed. No, let me rerun the numbers again. Give me that.
Stop. Look, you haven't proposed a single alternative. All you can say is all you can do is point to the effects and say, this is ridiculous. We don't know what we're dealing with. Well, it doesn't matter. You're
ignoring the Keynesian papers. The Keynesian papers state specifically.
Look, I have been given a directive by Her Majesty's government to bring something useful out of this. And if we don't, it'll be both of our heads. So if you will just cease this, it lets us finish our important work. We need to find more subjects. Use the land girls, but they all have to be accounted for.
So that's where you fail.
Look, I'm going to go for a cigarette, and we can complete this discussion later on. And there are footsteps coming towards the door.
So Effie is going to back away from the door and scamper off, probably even further down the corridor, because she doesn't want to get caught by the room with the shower in it either. So yeah, she's going to keep on heading down the other way. And
she does go down the corridor. That strange cloying smell is getting just a little stronger, and it becomes clear that the source of it is behind another door. Listening quietly at the door doesn't reveal any sounds or anything like that. But yeah, it's definitely seeping out underneath this doorway.
Yes, I think she's going to try the handle on the door and see if it will open up.
Could I add a detail to that?
Absolutely.
The detail is the door has no window, but it does have a sign on it which says "Danger, do not enter. Authorized personnel only."
Yes, and it has a symbol that Effie doesn't recognize. It has a stenciled paint stencil marking on it that looks official.
Excellent. So yeah, I don't think this it maybe gives her sort of a moment's pause, but I think it's that sort of like she tries the door handle kind of almost like on the assumption that it's going to be locked, but she tries it anyway.
It's not locked. And it appears that it was probably a massage area before, because it has these big heavy tables that are put out and cabinetry and such like that. But the tables one of the tables here has been converted into a laboratory surface. It's got Bunsen burners and lab equipment and clamps and things like that, and things that are bubbling. And there is an ashtray with a burning cigarette in it, suggesting that whoever was here had stepped out suddenly and unexpectedly. This thing is definitely where the odor is coming from. Would anyone like to add anything to this room? So what do you do? Feel free to add anything.
So I think Effie's going to kind of, again, just peer around into sort of the corners of the room just to make sure there's no one in here.
There's definitely no one here.
Yeah, cool. And then she's going to wander inside. I think she, takes the smoking cigarette out of the ashtray and puts it in her mouth, starts just to kind of like look at the other stuff on the table.
Yeah, well, she takes a drag. She has paroxysm of coughing. The other stuff on the there is definitely there's a large metal container of something with which it's not clear Effie would recognize it, but somebody else would recognize it, distilling apparatus. It's got a coil and it's got a water bath that's running from a faucet. Faucet is running water around something. And then it's dripping down into another container, and the thing that ends up in the other container is this thick, dark green liquid. And something Effie also sees is that there seems to be a couple of little bottles of that self-same liquid that have been stacked. They're sitting on the table next to the apparatus that is producing this. Just the size bottle, just a tiny little, like perfume vials almost.
Yeah, and I think that where the actual still is working, I think she's going to kind of bend down and just sort of like sniff at the liquid that's coming out of the end.
Oh God Almighty! Yes. Oh, it's that scent that was on the moor. Reified, 10 times stronger.
Yeah, I think she kind of gags a bit, and the cigarette falls out of her mouth onto the floor. And she sort of spits a few times, and backs off from the still.
So,
could I add a detail to that?
Please.
Would it be this might be stepping on the witness's toes, but in the coughing fit, would she have dropped the vial which shatters on the floor?
Did she pick up a vial?
No, I don't think she picked up a vial.
She hasn't picked up a vial.
I'm sorry.
No, she dropped the cigarette.
That's okay. No,
she dropped the cigarette.
Never mind.
But if the witness wants to, she can drop a vial or knock one off the table or anything you want.
I misunderstood the story. I misunderstood what was established. So
no,
I was
okay. All right. So right. Well, so yeah, you coughing fit. You drop the cigarette, and then what? You probably don't have a long time here until someone comes back.
Yeah, I think again she's probably going to decide that she's stayed her welcome in this place, in this room. So yeah, it's gonna head out and close the door behind her.
Okay, are you doing anything with the vials?
No, I don't think she's gonna take one of the vials. If it were less unpleasant, she might have taken one just for the heck of it. But I don't think she's gonna carry any more of that stuff around with her for now.
Okay.
I think there's a door stop by the door, and it's a little blue stone standing stone.
Absolutely. I think threatening steps at this point, I think, are going to. Effie realizes that the jig may be up if she doesn't get back to where she's supposed to be.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, and I think she's going to kind of head back to the back to where she was supposed to be waiting.
And she is, and so she does that, and she and just as she manages to duck into the thing, someone comes out of a door and slams it behind him and heads down the way to the laboratory, pausing at the shower room to go, what the devil, and go in there and turn the water off, and then making his way down to the laboratory. And as Effie presumably heaves a sigh of relief at not having been discovered, she looks down at her own hands, and they are stained bright green. And that's where we're going to stop.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I am going to add for Effie's trait. I think meddler is, we already knew she was curious, but she clearly likes just fiddling with stuff as well. And
that's the clue. Let's see. Stains from green liquids being distilled in the whole control board.
Hey, I'm going to invoke Open Door. I'm stepping away for like a minute. I'll be right back.
Awesome. So yeah, we'll give Mike a minute or two to get back. I will.
Or we can jump in the meantime.
Yep. So in the meantime, we will. I think it's So I will be taking back over as narrator, and Mike will be our witness again. I think, obviously, I'll start framing it once we get Mike back. But I think I'm going to pick up like immediately on the heels of that scene because I feel like we still have some potential for seeing how Effie will react.
I'm back.
No worries, Mike. Thank you. So yeah, as I said, we're on to our next scene now.
Just jumping to conclusion. Yeah.
So you can do your jumping to conclusions, and then you'll be the witness for this scene. And as I think I'm just gonna I'm going to continue on in the immediate aftermath of that scene we've just had.
This is the last scene of Act 1, correct?
Yeah,
okay.
it is. Yep. I'll give a. Actually, I'll do that now. So so this is the last scene of Act 1. once we get into Act 2 or Part 2, at that point, we have up to 3 scenes in Act 2. At the end of any scene, once we're into Part 2, the witness can decide that they're going to begin their journey to the final confrontation with the horror. Once basically we think we know where that might happen, where that might be, they can do that. So not this scene, but from any scene after this one, that the witness can decide to do that at the end of the scene. If they haven't done it at the end of 3 scenes, then we have a special scene called a force majeure where we force it. Looking at our time, it is probably better if we get it in. I'd say probably we want to be hitting like the final descent and stuff probably by past, I'll say. So that just to sort of keep that in mind, we probably 1 or 2 scenes in Part 2, I'd say, is probably going to be enough for us, really. So we'll try and move it along to there. But yeah, that's sort of how that goes. Cool. But yeah, that said, so yeah, Effie, you are sat in the lobby of this hotel, and or ex-hotel, and yeah, you have this like dark, well, not even dark, but sort of like a almost like a not like neon green, I don't think, but kind of a there is definitely that almost like phosphorescent-y sort of quality to it. It has like it kind of takes in a bit more light than you think it should, but it's staining all over your hands, a bit like iodine or something, but green rather than sort of orange. And it's not like thick. There's not like a thick layer there. It's almost like this, just like the skin itself has got that kind of greenish cast to it. How does this make you feel? How do you react?
Ew! What is this? She feels at it to feel as if it's, is it dry? Is it wet? If it is wet, is it oily?
Oily is probably the best way of putting it. It's like it just feels like a bit of an oily sheen to the skin, and just like rubbing at it, it doesn't like immediately come off. It's not like fresh ink on there. It's more like an actual stain.
Okay.
It possibly like rubs off a little at the touch, but it's not just like rubbing her fingers over it. It's not going to come off.
Okay, so she's looking around. So now she's in this lobby, and is the attendant still there, or is she all alone?
There's no one here at the moment. No.
Okay.
She's expecting Martha to be coming for her soon, but
Okay.
not like a.
She's gonna look around the lobby. She's gonna look around the lobby to see if there's like something she can like wipe her hands with. I mean, maybe she'll look around to see if there was perhaps a restroom here, and we'll go into the ladies' room to try to wash her hands.
There is just off the lobby. Yeah, there is a ladies' room that she can go into.
Yeah, she goes into the ladies' room and turns on the hot water tap and tries to get some soap and tries to wash this green off of her hands.
Yeah, excellent. So Brandon, I was going to come to you anyway, but yeah, so the first thing I was going to ask you, Brandon, was what do we sort of see in this bathroom that shows that it was like, this was a proper like upscale hotel in its day? And also feel free to add in whatever else you wanted to do.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the mirror has a now cracked but ornate frame, and the lighting fixture was a little miniature chandelier, of which of whose 8 bulbs 2 are currently functioning, and where there's a lot of dangling bits that probably had crystal, but don't now. Whether this is just deterioration or somebody actually vandalized it is hard to say. but it's beyond sad. It's a little strange, you know, as if the place is aged beyond the time it's been old.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, and Greg, what do we see in here that shows like the much more like utilitarian war era use that's now being put to?
It's also doubling as the radio closet for the town. And so away from this elaborate sink, this giant amount of wiring has been brought in through the ceiling, and it's attached to this large apparatus of dials and things, and they're just softly humming in the background.
Excellent. So yeah, Effie, you're running your hands under the water, and it's hot. It's not like scalding hot, but it's definitely warm water coming out, and it's just very, very slightly sticky, like that. Even just like if you've ever been a place that has really, and I always forget which way around it is, really really hard water, where it's just got that slightly, almost, you can almost feel just that like higher mineral content to the water. It's just got a tactility to it. It's unusual, and it's like you're taking off the top layer of this stain on your hand, but it's a bit like if you've ever like cut up beetroot, where it's like you just get that like pink staining all over your hands, and it's like you can get it off, but you really have to work at it, and it sort of tinges it even after you've managed to get the worst of it off. Yeah, you're sort of cleaning the hand, cleaning this off of your hands, and then there is you've got this hum of the radio equipment behind you, and then there's just like a raspy sound comes over the speaker there, and it just says, leave. And for a moment, in the mirror, as you glance, as you sort of catch your eye on it, you can see standing behind you, from the perspective of the mirror, a tall figure with antlers growing out of the side of their head, and a sort of sticky ichor running down it. And I'm just going to activate my card, which is early reveal. Which I can play during part 1 or part 2 to take over as narrator if I wasn't already, and reveal a clue that cannot be explained rationally. This is also in addition, so I will continue the scene. And yeah, so how do you react to this?
She sees this figure in the mirror. I think Effie screams and then like spins around to see to look at it directly.
Yeah, when you turn around, the figure is not there. But this wasn't like, oh, you saw an odd shadowy shape that, you know, maybe it was the coat hanger. This was, you saw them. You saw their kind of pallid, sunken skin. You saw the dark rims under their eyes. You saw these antlers, and in this doesn't look like where you actually get antlers growing on a deer. This looked like the antlers were like coming out of them, but like I said, that's what you saw in the mirror, and when you turn around, they are not there, and when you turn back to the mirror, they're not in the mirror.
She's after she screams, she's like physically trembling. She looks behind, she looks behind her, she looks in the mirror, she looks behind her, she looks at the mirror, she looks at the radio equipment, which told her to leave, and then she is out of there. She runs out of the restroom. She runs through the lobby. She like bursts, she throws the front doors open, doesn't try to shut them behind her, and she's just running down the driveway to the main road, like as fast as she can, for basically until she gets winded, and then she slows to a jog, and then slows to a fast walk. But she's walking really fast and is looking behind her. What was that? Oh my God! What was that thing? What was that thing? It was like the symbol in the cave.
Yeah, excellent. And I think as you head out, actually, I'm going to ask. So as you're running through the grounds, and again, this is going to be a similar question to before, but I'll ask it the other way around. So, Greg, again, the sort of the grounds. This was obviously like a big formal sculpted garden and that sort of thing. What do we see? Again, what do we see in here? That's like a remnant of the Victorian grandeur of when this hotel was built.
There's a lot of statuary that has been built up and collected over many years. And there's a number of different pieces, very classical sort of poses, but a lot of them feature this sort of obsession with putting antlers on them, or looks like maybe faded decorations from a festival are at their feet.
Yeah, excellent. Mike, Brandon, I'm going to ask you, what do we see? What do we see here that's some of the old wildness of the moorland that still sort of shows through, even through like the carefully manicured? Well, I mean, obviously they're not well kept, but the carefully planned out gardens that Effie's running through.
Yes, there are these gardens that have been made, but in the fashion minorly reminiscent of the hedgerows that you might see in Normandy and such like that. What are being used to divide cultivated areas are these very utilitarian thorn bushes that are ancient and are largely are found here in this area, and they're very effective at keeping the deer and such like that out of the gardens, because they are twisted and have jagged thorns in them and such like that, but they have a forbidding aspect to them. One can see why they were used, but on the other hand, they seem to harken back to the days when you had to keep wolves away from your cave, and you would use things like this rather than fences and barbed wire.
Nice. And yeah, I think as Effie is kind of reaching the gates to the hotel, there is, you notice, and I mean, it's not that they weren't here before, but you just didn't really pay attention to them before. But flanking the gate leading out are two figures, and again, they're these fawn figures with huge spreading antlers on them, one on either side of the gateway, sort of staring at each other across it. And you will have to pass between them if you want to leave this way. What do you do?
So as Effie is walking very purposely toward the gate, that's when she realizes that these satyrs or fawns or whatever they are with the big antlers are there, and she stops and freezes mouth the gate and looks between the two of them.
Yeah. You said you will, if you want to go this way, that you will have to go between them. You probably think that you can, like, just looking from here, there's definitely places where you could probably squeeze out under a hedge or try and slip through the bars between the actual wrought iron fence itself if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think she's going to do that. I think she's going to lead the path, like go into the now somewhat overgrown lawn, to an area where she sees like the wrought iron bars. There were some that were rusted and have broken out, so she's going to have to get on her hands and knees and like kind of crawl through the grass. Probably not going to do good things. It's definitely going to stain her dress a bit.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, she manages to crawl out. But as she's sort of crawling out, a patch of the ground she's going through, again, it's got that same consistency that she felt in the other place, that sort of soft, spongy, sticky feeling to it. It's not like it's quicksand. It's not going to suck her in or anything. She's able to cross it. But as she sort of presses her hands into this soil, you can feel underneath it again those like odd fungusy shapes beneath it. But this time, as she puts her hand in one, she just feels it move and writhe against her hand.
She doesn't scream this time, but a look of shock and fear crosses her face, and she pulls her hands away but quickly tries to get out of there.
Yeah, and from then she's then able to make her exit fine, and that's where we will end that scene. So I will ask you to again, if you want to choose a trait, and I will add. I'm just going to add the fungus is alive ? As a clue. It has that sort of wormy kind of thing going on with it. But yeah. With that, we'll take a moment to record our conclusions. And as I said, this will be the first scene of part 2. At the end of this, so this will be narrated by Mike, and Greg will be the witness.
I'm going to play my card.
Oh, yep. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to try to play my card.
So I'm just going to say for trait, I'm going to put easily spooked.
I would be spooked if an antler man showed up behind me.
I would have been had the spook.
How about that wasn't so much. Yeah, that wasn't so. Yeah, I guess you're right.
Abjectly terrified right now is a-okay.
Yeah. The word I'm looking for.
Okay, I want my card to show up, and it's not showing up.
That's
I put it in the card slot.
Yeah, that's odd.
Under special card. And then
I think I'm going to add abjectly terrified at what's going. I think I'm going to add abjectly terrified.
Cool. And yeah, that seems to be showing up now. That's cool.
There, good.
Yeah,
okay,
I got
fine.
it now.
All right.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So yes, it's a bizarre. Yes, something of interest to science, like this strangely moving fungus. And perhaps the notion that some of the locals are actively involved in bringing it about. So
perfect.
Opens the door for strange things to happen to people in part 2, and to the witness in part 3.
Nice. So yeah, cool. Yeah, and as I said, we're in part 2 now. So the witness can, at the end of this, if they wish, choose to begin the journey towards the and again, looking at time, it might be. We'll see if we really don't feel like we've got somewhere to go at the end of this scene, then we can probably go for another. But I would probably suggest that we do want to begin our dark descent at the end of this scene.
Okay.
But like I said, it is up to you, Greg. And if you feel like there's not an appropriate opportunity.
I know where to go right now, but
yeah.
Straight to hell. Sorry.
So, and I will actually just explain very briefly. We'll do the proper thing in a moment. But what the basically part 3, when we have, you'll see that there's a lot of scenes that are the journey scenes. these are essentially played out as short vignettes, just with one person narrating at a time. So we'll basically do a round of going around each person, just saying a few lines and then moving on to the next one. So that's what that bit is.
Perfect.
Then we have the final horror, where we actually confront what the horror that's going on, which might be a physical thing, it might be like a big monster, or it might just be like a sudden revelation of what's really going on here. I'll explain once we actually get to that point how we choose what happens, but those are our next steps. But yeah, cool. So if everyone's good, I haven't actually written my name. I think I know where I am.
Yeah.
So just so I'm clear, so so we basically continue the scenes, but now like things can be more overt.
That's right. We now have
Yeah.
the part 2 options available, which are to extend the strange effects that are going on to people who are not the witness. So you can start to have strange stuff happen to other people, and also reveal inhuman physiological traits, deformities, mutilations and stuff, again, on anyone that isn't the witness. Once we get into part 3, both of those can apply to the witness, so things can start getting really nasty for Effie.
Okay, so if I am narrator, okay, I think I'm going to pick up right where we left the previous scene.
Yep.
So Effie is now on the road back to town. Again, walking quickly. She's probably tired a bit by now, but she's walking as quickly as she can away from this former hotel where all this weird crap is going down. It was late afternoon, getting on toward. I'll say it was late afternoon. It's not quite getting dark yet. The sun is definitely getting lower in the sky, and from the distance behind her, she hears the sound of a motor. She hears the sound of like iron gates, like opening, and the sound of the motor. It's a car or possibly a small truck that is approaching her from behind.
So Effie looks around. Is there a convenient hedge row to sort of wiggle herself underneath and watch from the side of the road?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a hedge.
She tries to stay out of sight and watch the truck go by.
Okay, so it is a black a black car is approaching fairly slowly. Because it's got its headlights on because it's late in the afternoon. The sun's over the west. The sun is starting to dip behind the western hills, and its sky's still lit up, but you're now in kind of shadows of the hills. So the car's headlights are on. It looks like there is someone in the passenger seat that's holding an electric torch, and it's also like a really bright one. It's not quite a searchlight, but the figure is like shining as if they are looking for something or probably someone. What do?
I think Effie might get underneath even further and try and make her way parallel to the road, but on the other side of the hedge.
Okay. If I may.
Please.
The hedge that Effie has secreted herself underneath is one of these horrible thorn bushes.
Oh, yeah.
And she finds that her clothing has become hung up on the thorns. And she can remain very still, but movement is likely, at the very least, to tear her clothing and might attract a lot of attention.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Okay,
yeah.
So she tries to move back, and then he feels like that thorn in her back, like right in the middle of her lower back. She goes, "Ha!" And then she covers her mouth really quickly because she realized that she made a little noise.
I'm going to say just for dramatic purposes, that happens just as the car was just as the car was passing. And she says that she makes that utterance, and the car stops, and that light, that other light is like now shining down, It's now shining through the hedge, like more or less in Effie's general direction. What's Effie gonna do?
Screw it. She scrambles back. She doesn't care if her shirt gets torn up in the back at this point. She needs to get away from this car.
Are you heading back? Are you like going? So at this point, you've got a couple of choices.
Yeah.
You could. So I'm going to say that this hotel, it was away from town, kind of like in the moors.
Yeah.
So your choices are: you can like run back toward the hotel. You can continue going like in the direction of the road, or you can like head into the moors.
Oh, I'll head into the moors.
Excellent.
It's an obvious choice.
And as you glance behind you, there is David. Could you tell us what is odd or unusual about this car and or its inhabitants?
Yeah, so I think as they've kind of been shining this torch back in and looking for Effie, the person holding it turns back towards a car from it, and they do lower the torch, so they're not like shining it into the driver's face, but it does illuminate the inside of a car for a start. The first thing you do notice about it is this has a it's painted in like military sort of olive drab. It has like it does have like the wool control board insignia like stamped onto the door, but when the light catches the person sat behind the driver's seat, you can just see, and it's one of those things where it could just be like the way the light is or reflecting off something, but they've just got that like a patch of like green staining running down their sort of cheek and down their jawline into their shirt, and it's got a kind of almost like a glossy sheen to it. And then the person puts the torch, like turns the torch off entirely, and it's plunged back into darkness again.
Fantastic. So Effie, you're running into the moor.
Yep.
And it's
and full tilt.
Okay. So again, the sun is getting lower into the sky, and there's like there are like long shadows. So it's very hard to navigate, especially given the heather that's grown there. That regularly covers like rocky outcroppings or small ravines that you wouldn't normally see because you wouldn't normally be able to see. So, Brandon, what sort of Effie comes to as she's like running through the moor, she comes to a barrier she comes to a natural barrier. Brandon, what obstacle or barrier is in the moor is stopping her progress from the direction that she wanted to go in?
This is a drainage canal. Some of the moor, and so it's crisscrossed. In order to plant the fields and such like that, they've cut some canals that are there to drain excess water off of the wetlands into the nearby streams.
So I think Effie sees this moor. She comes right up to it and stops. And she's looking at this ditch. I'm guessing it's fairly deep. And she immediately starts scrambling around. We're going back to the beginning, folks. She finds a nice stick. And she's going to try and pole vault over this drainage ditch. And remember, she has a sense of adventure. And maybe she's part of a pole vaulting team. But that's what she's going to try and do. So she's hoping to find a big stick and just pole vault over.
Well, if we were playing Dungeon World, I'd call for you to make it. I'd call for you to defy danger right now.
You just get to tell me what I do.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Brendan wants to add something. Go for it.
I want to suggest that the stick isn't very much help, so she just bounds over the thing like a deer.
Can I rephrase that just slightly? I think Effie has done this before and had a lot of difficulty with it.
Yeah.
She finds the stick, she gets it in the mud, and she finds it surprisingly easy.
Yes.
Like her legs have grown 5 times stronger as she lands very gracefully on the other side and starts going really quickly.
Fantastic! I love it. As you're running through the moor, as you are running through the moor, it becomes easier and easier to traverse it. At some point, you get a sense. At some point, parts of it start to feel familiar, and you feel a bit of a draw toward a particular, to like one hill that you may have been there. You may have seen before, but as the sun gets lower in the sky and the shadow of the hill, as the shadows fall across the moor, you see ahead, perhaps maybe just a quarter mile ahead, there's a green glow which is coming up from an opening on the side of this hill.
And she runs towards it.
I think that would be a good end of scene.
Yeah, I think so too. Clue would be her.
Yeah, clue I think is going to be
her surprising gracefulness.
Yeah, I like that.
I'll let you do it. And I think fictionally we're at the descent at this point. I think, yeah, okay. Yeah, we're going in that barrow again,
Absolutely.
folks. Here we go.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to very briefly explain how the dark descent works. So essentially, we will now just go around in order. I don't think it matters what order particularly. We'll probably just go from like left to right along the character keeper for this one, just because it's simpler. On your turn, you get to take on the role of either narrator, watcher, or witness, but this isn't as significant as it is normally. You don't have to actually make any changes to the character keeper or anything like that. This is basically just to say, if you take on the role of the witness, then you will be saying what Effie does, and this will only be, like I said, a very quick vignette, just a few sentences sort of thing. You will be saying what, if you take on the narrator role, you will be saying what the physical environment is and what stuff is happening as we progress through this scene. If you take on the watcher, then you just literally add on an additional description to whatever the last person before you said. So just a bit of extra detail. And this, you can change this each time you take a turn, because we'll keep going around basically until we hit. So basically we this one will, and I'll try and keep a rough tally of this on the thing. Once we have had 11 turns around all of us, from that point onwards, the person whose go it is can say, we've reached the final horror. If we get to 16 times around, we get to the final horror regardless. I'll also now explain how the final horror works. Essentially, whoever thinks they've got a strong idea for our final horror, but can basically say, I think I know what's going to happen here. We don't explain it out loud. Then if like two really both think they have a strong idea, we'll kind of come to sort of compromise, but they will take on the role of narrator for the final horror. Then the person to their left will be the witness for that scene. The person who is the narrator will present this horror, what it entails, what it looks like, what's going on, and the witness will get a chance to say how they react to this and what they do. And then that scene will be over, basically. Also, obviously, anyone who in that scene who is a watcher will also get the chance to add details to what the narrator says. Then we have an epilogue scene where basically, with our setup, the two people who were watchers in the final horror scene will be the narrator and witness, and the narrator gets a chance to say how the final horror, how the horror continues after this, and the narrator will get a chance the witness will get a chance to say what happens to Effie after all this is done. But we'll get to those properly in a moment, but I just wanted to give like the overall view now. With that said and done, I think I will take the first action of our thing. And I said we'll just go through, so me, Brandon, Greg, Mike, and round and round until we've got through it all. I will take the and like I said, just to reiterate, the point of these set of scenes is this is the journey to the final horror. So it's kind of what the both physical and metaphysical and journey is as we see fit. Obviously, we have the part 3 things from Warped Bodies and the Bizarrery open to us now as well. So I'm going to start off as the witness, and so Effie looks behind her, back over the moor again, where it sees some lights shining off in the distance, and then turns back where this like odd green glow emerges from the depths of the barrow and begins to walk down the steps. And her eyes, as she does, they reflect this green light, and they reflect it a bit more than they should. There's that almost like cat eye effect going on.
As she goes further down into the barrow, Effie begins to hear the voice that she heard in the wool control board bathroom, except instead of it having this forbidding tone and saying leave, it is saying come. And its tone is almost warm, slightly commanding, slightly prepossessing.
The stones in the cave feel like the brass handles in the shower room of the Turkish baths.
As she descends through here, the walls of this corridor, she gets to the bottom of the steps. Eventually end at a more level corridor, which is still narrow, and painted on the sides of this corridor are many of the similar primitive glyphs of antler-headed people.
And the one of them looks more freshly painted, and the ink looks like blood.
Effie smells that the odor is the cloying odor is becoming stronger, but it's not offensive to her. It is aromatic, complex, fascinating, and she realizes that it's coming that it's actually coming from her, from the green stains that have include both her hands and now significant parts of her body.
As she looks down on her hands, she also sees her feet. And her shoes have become incredibly uncomfortable to wear. As she kicks them off, her toes have curled back and begun to fuse together almost like a hoof.
And at that, she feels wetness pouring down the sides of her face, and she feels on both of her temples. She feels on both of her temples, and they're like bony projections, which are, and as she feels them, she can feel them grow out of her, like horn, as they start to curve upward.
And yeah, just she drops to her knees for a moment and lets out a long guttural cry that echoes down the length of the corridors as these horns press out of her skin, and there's liquid running down it, but again, it's rather than blood, it's this sticky, sappy liquid that runs down her cheeks and onto the ripped remains of her dress.
To to one side of the corridor as she continues to advance, she sees a form, and she recognizes there the body of Mr. Hamilton, the former manager of the Hydro. But he has horns coming from his head. His hands are warped into claws. His legs are similarly deformed and such like that. And he appears to have died in agony.
In this room where Mr. Hamilton lies, there is a flat, glassy pool that extends beyond vision into the dark cave beyond. And she gets closer. She puts her hands slowly into the water. She can see roots growing up into the moor.
Okay, and I'm just going to mention that now we on your turn, anyone on their turn has the opportunity to say that we have reached the final destination and give us a brief description of what we see there. But yeah, so Mike, it's your turn to continue. Yeah.
Right. It was I had an idea. I'm not sure how to incorporate it with what was established the past couple of rounds. Okay. So as she's looking up at this, at this pool with the roots, and the pool that's extending, she also notices. She also notices what almost look. What she notices set set on the side of the bank of this pool are army uniforms, as if they've been taken off and just cast off. And at that, she feels a nearly uncontrollable urge to jump into the pool and begin swimming off into this distance, which she's underground, but she can see because the pool itself is giving off a faint green glow.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to say that we've reached our final destination now, as I think as she swims out a little further, Effie dives down below the surface of the water, and there's one of those, sort of underground, tunnels through into another cave behind, and this water is, again, it's got that sticky feeling to it, and there's that sweetness to it, but it doesn't seem to hold her back, and she pierces the water on the other side, and that is where we will meet our final horror. So I'm going to ask if anyone would like to volunteer to be our narrator for the final horror.
I'd love to.
Yeah, if everyone else is happy, then yeah, that sounds good to me. So Brandon will be our narrator. That makes me our witness for this final scene. So as I said, for this one, we, as a narrator, we want to see basically establish the final horror we see. I will give a reaction to it, and then obviously, as ever, you can draw on the watchers to help you flesh out your descriptions.
As Effie enters the chamber, she realizes she's not alone, and that within the chamber there are a number of others, and one reaches forward with a clawed hand held out, palm upwards, towards her. Not in an aggressive gesture.
And I think Effie kind of crouches down where she is. She sort of eyes them warily. Again, not screaming, not scared, but still wary of exactly what's going on and exactly what this means.
And the creature turns its hand and puts it gently on the top of her head, in between her horns, and says, "There is nothing to be afraid of. We are here now with you. They sought to control us. They think they control us, but they are wrong."
What are you? What am I?
Yes. What are we? Our race was known as the Likoi, and we were here before those people who imagine themselves to be the owners of this world were here. A disease killed us all. That a strange magic killed us all. And we could only survive by imbuing our essence into a part of this world here, with the hope that one day there would be a vessel in which we could be reborn.
The cave walls are covered in glyphs that slowly bleed a yellow fluid.
Yes, this sacred place is where the last surviving members of our race reposed. Their essences, what makes us who we are. We did this with no knowing whether it was to be our final death. And now you are one of us. And you will have the opportunity to take this world back with us and restore it to its proper place.
What would you do? What are you going to do?
Look within yourself. Tell me, what do you want to do? Feel deep.
I don't know. All this is so strange. I don't know. And she's going to reach up again and sort of touch the antlers growing out of her head.
Yes, look at yourself in the water. Are you not beautiful?
And I think that she takes a look at herself in the pool, and I think that, and I think actually that's probably we kind of see that sort of see her looking down into the pool and see her looking at the creature. And I think then she goes over to them and kind of not kneels down before them, but kind of crouches down next to them. And I think that is probably where we will leave that scene. And the last thing we have to do is our epilogue. So what we will do here is we'll basically pass these rolls to the left twice. So essentially, Greg will end up as the witness and Mike as the narrator. That's on it just for sake of what's it, but for this last bit, for the epilogue, I'm just going to double check this one. It's been a little bit. So for the epilogue, the witness, the person with the witness card determines the final event, the final outcome for the witness.
Final fate of the witness.
That's the word. Yep. Which is usually assumed to be either that they have died or that they escape with in some manner. But I think there's a possibility for another option here, if you wish. And then the final horror. So then the narrator gives the sort of the final detail of what happens with the horror in the aftermath of this, how their presence continues to be felt on the land, basically, and as watchers we can kind of as ever add little details if we wish. Greg, would you like to give us a little epilogue for Effie?
The sun is fully set, and Ilkley Moor is covered in a thick fog. And there's a young couple, and the man of the two has recently got his papers. He's been, sent off to the front, and he's riding along with his sweetheart, and their headlights begin to dim just for a second. And what they think they see in the dim headlights is a herd of deer crossing across the road. As 20, 50 of these deers run across the road, but in the center of them is Effie. And her horns are magnificent. And as she runs through the moor, little phosphorescent sparks pop up behind her hooves.
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. And Mike, how do we see the lasting influence of the horrors from beneath?
So I think the final scene of this movie is a cutback to the laboratory that was in the Hydro, and there's a man in a military uniform, like looking at papers, like sitting across a desk, and there's a scientist, a man in a white lab coat, sitting across, and the officer says, so the serum that you found in that barrow ended up not being so the test subjects, it did not enhance their abilities. This is not something that we can use for the war effort. And the scientist says, no, all of our subjects were lost. This entire experiment was an abject failure. We should cordon this place off. And the officer nods. Later, there are army personnel that are putting up like big metal fencing with razor wire across the top, like around, like with the moor behind it. And as you see through the moor, there are more and more of these depressions as the vegetation seems to be dying. And there's a big sign that says "Danger, keep out." But as the camera pans away, on this side of the fence, we see a piece of the ground suddenly depressed.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, lovely.
That was great. Thank you very much, everyone. I really enjoyed the little story we came together with there. So I'm going to stop our recording now, and if anyone has been watching, thank you very much.